Welcome to A Closer Look. I'm your host, Linda Fontaine. Today, my special guest is Dr. Randall Bell. He's an author. He's written a lot of books. His latest being Post-Traumatic Thriving, The Art, Science, and Stories of Resilience. And he's coming to us all the way from Southern California. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Bell.
Oh, Linda, it's great to be with you. Thanks.
Well, tell us about this last book. You've written a lot. Now, this one sounds very interesting, and it sounds very current for what we are going through today, especially. Talk to me about that.
Sure. Well, it was an accident, honestly. I started this book 10 years ago because I have kind of an interesting career, or at least I think it's interesting, but I study disasters. I've worked on the Bikini Atoll nuclear weapons test sites. I worked on the World Trade Center Flight 93 crash site, Hurricane Katrina, O.J. Simpson, John Benet Ramsey. All these hundreds of cases I've worked on for decades, and I'm an economist to begin with, but I started to notice, Linda, that I found the people behind the statistics more interesting than the economics. And I also noticed that I had this unique access to sit down and talk with the people that were in the headlines. And so I did. I sat at board tables and kitchen tables and coconut tree logs, and I listened to people and what they were doing to kind of work through this traumatic situation that they were in. And the book is packed with wisdom, but it didn't come from me. I just simply listened to people that were really kind of working through this stuff. And then I got the academic research, really went through that and put it all together to, hopefully help a few people work through their traumatic situations.
Wow, that is amazing. And I found that it was very interesting when I was going through scanning the book that you use these little vignettes of people's stories, and you found this common thread that I guess one of the things you said is you can dive or thrive, dive, survive, or thrive, or all three of them. And these all had a similar, strain that went through them. Talk to me about that.
Sure. The book has 3 sections, like you just said, dive, survive, and thrive. And, I also say in the book, the problem is not the problem. The problem is, dealing with the problem. In other words, when you got a tragedy that hits you, whether it's death, divorce, disease, destruction, disaster, whatever it is, afterwards, you got choices. And some people choose to let the whole situation bury them. Some get back on their feet. That's very admirable. But some people, the people I focus on in the book are the people that use the situation and the energy from that, trauma to do something really fantastic that they wouldn't have done otherwise. That's the whole point of the book, is to kind of tap into that energy and do something really remarkable.
Well, how could we do that? If we, what if we're just stuck in the dive, and survive? How do we thrive if it's not something that's already in us? How can we bring that out?
Yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed about being stuck in a dive situation or phase for a while. The problem is you don't want to get stuck there. And also you want to go through the survival period. You don't want to jump ahead to thrive, or you won't genuinely heal. But it starts with 2 principles. One is our breathing. We have a parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically fight or flight. That trauma gets us into that mode. But we can literally switch the switch in our brain's chemistry to the sympathetic nervous system, where we calm down and we start healing. So I talk about the science of that in the first phase. And the second one is people that dive or only survive are usually missing an ingredient. That you got to tell your story. You cannot bottle this stuff inside. It may be an ugly conversation, but you got to find a trusted person and tell your story.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. We've all gone through some hardships in our life that we don't know sometimes how we even got out of it. But sometimes if we have something that we can follow to help us dig out of that, and oftentimes that is talking to someone else. That's one of the key ingredients. Now, can you tell us some of these vignettes, some of these people, for instance, that were going through hardships and then became inspirational and were able to thrive?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you about JC. I met JC in San Quentin Prison, which is where death row is here in California. He made a very serious mistake as a 17-year-old and was prosecuted as an adult. He got 25 years to life. I met JC. He was paroled after 22 years in prison. And not kidding you, Linda, I just went to his college graduation. He graduated with honors, and now he's on track for his master's and PhD. That's post-traumatic thriving. Another example, you might know of her, Jerry Jewell. I went to high school with her. Jerry was a star on the Facts of Life TV show a while ago, and she was born with a disability. And I knew this in high school. Well, she had these natural ingredients to thrive, and not only starred on that TV show, she's spoken at the White House 3 times, and she just did a movie that's on HBO. So those are people that have actually taken these principles and put them into work. There are 15 chapters, and there's also, which align with the 15 steps you kind of have to take to go through that path. I'm just trying to make people aware of that process, because there's a lot of great science that backs it all up, and kind of get on a healthy healing path.
Very good. So who would you recommend this book to? Anybody that's going through anything in particular that's hard, that's going through a depression, so to speak, or somebody that just needs to shift gears, or is it for maybe anybody to draw inspiration from? What would you suggest? I mean, obviously for me, it's people that are going through trauma and how to be inspired to get out of it. But what else would you recommend?
Well, the statistics are that 66 to 85% of the entire population has been through a trauma by college age. So there's a lot of people, and trauma hits and affects people in different ways. So something that may not affect you may affect me or someone else. It's not a competition. So it's for anybody. You said the word depression. A lot of people, go through the shock and the anger and the denial, but then they kind of land in that depression spot. And if you find yourself there, I think this book has some principles, both anecdotally and scientifically, that will kind of help you work through that. That's I think, the target person that should read the book.
And you've written a lot of books. What brought you to wanting to write this book?
Yeah, well, this book's very different because my last book was all about Leo Fender, who invented the electric guitar. Mr. Fender lived 2 streets away from me, and he had a glass eye, he was deaf, and yet today, Fender guitar is $1 billion industry. So that was the last book I wrote. This book's very, very different than that. But I used Leo's story in this book.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When you were telling me a little bit about him, I thought, I bet this was one thing that led to another with this book idea. I love that. Is there any other pearls of wisdom you would like to share with us about your book?
Well, the thing is I shared the 2 dynamic duos. There's about 8 or 9 principles that are like that through the book. Ultimately, you want to land in a place, and it may take a year or 2. I told you about JC. That was a 2-year process to take him from an angry, macho kind of guy to a guy that was healthy mentally and could do those kinds of things. But ultimately, you want to land in a place where you're not triggered, where you have a memory of your trauma, but it doesn't trigger that nervous system we talked about and get you full of anxiety and get you angry and that kind of thing. That's the goal of trauma. We don't want to forget about the trauma. We just simply want to get to a healthy place where those memories don't take us down in our day-to-day lives today.
True. Now, 9/11, is there anything about that in your book?
I think I talk about it. I know I'm talking about one of my books. I worked on 9/11. It's a long story, but I was retained in that case. But I happened to be in New York giving a speech 6 days after 9/11. And I'm haunted by those memories because literally you had people walking up to you with a flyer saying, "Hey, have you seen my mom?" Yeah. I mean, it's just horrific damage. But even something as bad as that, or even just simply watching it on TV, can be traumatizing. And so the principles, again, kind of help you work through that so that you can have memories of it, and be respectful of the whole situation. But on the other hand, you're not taken down and switched into that negative place where you can go if you don't kind of apply these principles.
That's true. Very good advice. So you said there's two components, and the first one was breathe to start off, right?
Yeah, Linda, can't make this stuff up. The first time I ever meditated in my life, I was sitting between two convicted murderers in San Quentin prison. I mean, they call it grounding because some people associate meditation with religion. We're not talking about religion here. We're talking about breathing exercises that resets the brain's reactions. And, there I am. And then later, I was talking to my cardiologist, and she said, hey, if you want to heal from some of your heart issues, I recommend meditation or grounding. There's 20 studies that came out of Harvard that prove, without a doubt, that breathing exercises kind of help us out. So, important principles.
I agree with you 100%. It's amazing what they say meditation can do, just breathing. So we'll start right there with breathing. Real quick, we only have about 30 seconds. How can we get a hold of your book?
Oh, go to drbell.com, go to Amazon, the book's right there, Post-Traumatic Thriving, or any bookstore, has it. It's everywhere.
Very good. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today, Dr. Bell. Again, that's Post-Traumatic Thriving, the Art, Science, and Stories of the Resilience. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Stay warm. Lucky you in Southern California.
Thanks, Linda.
And we'll see you with another episode of A Closer Look coming up.